All right. Okay. So, to anyone joining us, welcome. My name is Jonah Mitchell with Marietta College Admissions, and I am joined tonight by Katy McDaniel, head of the history department here at Marietta. So, Katy, if you want to go ahead and just kind of do a little introduction to yourself.
Yeah, sure. I'm Katy McDaniel, and I am the chair of the Department of History, Philosophy, and Religion, as well as Gender Studies. So we do a lot of the humanities on campus. And my particular specialty is British history, but I do really all the modern history, and I teach world history as well. And Jonah was in the capstone with me.
I was.
So he knows I do the capstone for senior majors as well.
And it's a great capstone, so you should definitely look into it. So, and no matter what your major is, you can also pick up a history major, right?
That's right. Yes. And the history major is designed to be very flexible. So we don't have, it's not the hugest major, and it doesn't have a lot of specific classes that you have to take. So you have to take them in a certain order. We really, we're open to students taking what they're interested in, and we try to design the major for that, and that makes it actually good double major. And I think, were you double major too, Jonah?
I was, yes.
So yep. Yeah, so you can speak to that. It's a good it's a good major to add to something else, and we've had people who've combined it with political science, but yep. Also with various business degrees, with biology, with music. It's really, there's been a lot of really cool combinations that people have put together.
And it's definitely doable. I will speak to that. I didn't pick it up. I mean, I've always been a history fan, especially in high school and stuff like that. And, but towards the end of my freshman year, Dr. Young recommended, if I liked history so much, I should pick up a major. So I joined it with my political science major, and it was definitely doable. And it provides a good perspective to whatever your major is. You get background to a lot of events or happenings in your major that you don't maybe think about, be it the sciences or even engineering and political science and stuff like that. It's kind of cool to put a time period, some other players and stuff like that on the events you're learning about in those classes. So
yeah, everything's got a history.
Exactly.
And I think especially, you mentioned science. I teach kind of a history of science class, scientific revolution and enlightenment. And it's so interesting to think about what some of those, early ideas in science were, and how flawed they were, and the kind of story of how do the ideas that work better get popular. And it really helps you to understand how science works as a method of inquiry as well. So
yes, and it makes you thankful that we have progressed a little bit in scientific and medical knowledge. So yes. I'm glad that when I go to the doctor, they're no longer just looking at 4 different colors in my body. And
right, the humors, yes. I know. Yeah, so I've been, a lot of us in the history department, we've been thinking about of course, the historical parallels with other times when there were diseases that were rampant. And I know that you were talking about Dr. Young, Matt Young. He's teaching a class this semester. It just so happened that they're reading a book called The Ghost Map, which is a good book for your reading list. Jonah, you read it?
I actually have read that one, yes.
Yeah, and it's about the cholera epidemic. Yep. And it's very interesting, so fascinating, and so fascinating to think about. It was a disease that was rampant, and yet people didn't really understand where it was coming from. They didn't have a good sense of how to avoid it or how to treat it. And I always think it's so easy for us to be, condescending toward people in the past. Oh, didn't they know? Didn't they know about germs? The bubonic plague. Didn't they know it was the fleas? No, they didn't know. And think about where we are now. There's so many things we don't know about COVID-19. And right. I think it gives you a little humility, right? We've got some perspective. We can kind of think about, well, we're not the only people in history who've ever had to deal with this, but we have, a discipline of science that's actually, and we have a good theory of disease that hopefully will get us through in a better way than either the cholera epidemic or the plague.
Yes, hopefully. And that's great that you brought it up, because I use that phrase that you used to describe that all the time, where you'd say armchair historian, just
Yes.
looking back, and just kind of with a laid back view, being like, how could they not know? We're so much more advanced, and
Mhm.
you
We're
don't think
smarter
about.
than they were. We're
Yes.
so smart.
Now, I will say that when you take some history courses and you get to learn about different aspects of history, um, your answer then to the question, what time period of history, or what time period would you want to live in, will probably be present day.
Yeah. I always say that too. I never like those movies where like the heroine ends up going back in time. It's like, you're gonna die in
Yeah.
childbirth. You can't vote, and like what are you doing?
Right. Yeah. Warring
Yeah.
armies, disease. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's good to,
Where's the penicillin?
right. Makes you definitely appreciate a lot of the events that have gotten us to today, and puts a good perspective on everything. So, yeah,
That's right. Yeah.
definitely worth knowing history. So,
Yeah. And, one of the things that I think is really key is, I think people have this idea like, well, what am I going to do with a history degree? What can I do with it? And a lot of, when you're studying the humanities, a lot of that is preparation for life in general, being a good citizen, being a good voter, knowing how to understand the human condition and how people have lived in times past. But I just want to emphasize that it also does have good career applications, and that it is a very marketable degree to have. And it's very desirable, actually, for corporations. Businesses like to hire history majors. History major is great for law schools, for even medical schools. If you take the additional classes, in the sciences that you need for that, that humanistic perspective is great for doctors to have. It's also the case that there are a lot of sort of burgeoning fields that need people who can do good research and who understand how to use evidence and argumentation to make good points. So the ability to write, argue, research, those are all good things that we are all about teaching people, that are very practical skills that you take with you wherever you go. And really, you're not just prepared for one job, you're prepared for the many different things that you might decide to take on in your career after you graduate. And nobody stays in one job anymore. We know that. So why prepare for just one job? You need to be prepared for all of the jobs and have your talents developed in those key areas.
yes,
So.
definitely. And, I would say history, when you get into it, is a lot more than just, reading a book and being like, okay, here's the players, here's the facts. Yes, that is part of it. You got to know what was happening, but it's also a process of how you look at things. It's how you evaluate situations and what's going on. And so, like you said, that is useful for anywhere in life, no matter what you're ending up doing. That process of evaluating, what do we know, what do we don't know, what's conjecture, what's actual, fact, and evaluating everything from all that is useful no matter where you are. I mean, everywhere needs critical thinkers like that. So,
oh, for sure. Critical thinking and information literacy. I mean, those are really at the center of what historians are doing, and we need that more than ever
right.
now, for sure. We do have a couple of minors that I would mention that do have more specific career applications, and we did that because we knew students wanted to be able to have some kind of career path that they wanted to be starting to develop in their undergraduate careers. And so we developed a GIS minor. That's one that Dr. Young developed. Yep. That is Geographic Information Systems. Some people are moving to what's called digital humanities, and it's the idea of kind of mapping and visual presentation of information. Those are really high demand jobs. And this is a minor that is interdisciplinary, and it's great really for all kinds of different majors, but it's got great historical applications, as you might guess, with all of the maps and visualizations and things like that. Then the other one that's new is public history minor. And we had a lot of students who were coming in who loved history and wanted that to be their career, especially like working in a museum or working in an archive, or, you know, in the government. We have an alum who works as the historian for the National Park Service, who worked on the Lewis and Clark Trail, and getting that extended actually. So that's very cool. And so the idea was, you know, how can we help them to augment the humanities education that they're getting through their historical studies with something that has this more particular application to the field of public history. And Brandon Downing, Dr. Downing, he created that, and that involves internships at local museums, which we have many, many great local museums. We have partnerships with them, and that's been a really great compliment. And I hope that, you know, that students will be finding that to be, you know, fun and useful, not just, you know, not just, well, I have to try to have a career, but like, this is actually going to change the way people even look at museums, you know?
Right. Not just there to fulfill a requirement, but, you know, to actually get involved in what's going on and what the museum has to offer. So yeah, definitely.
So much of how the public does encounter history is through museums and memorials and public events and, you know, those kinds of things. And so it's important to, again, be a critical thinker about how that information is portrayed, and maybe be a part of, you know, helping to create a more accurate public account.
Definitely. Not, you know, maybe knowing a little more than just the plaque you get when you're looking at, you know, say Al Capone's car or something like that in DC, you know, just, you know, being able to know a little more about that background or what's going on and just everything involved with it. So, you know, it's definitely good to intertwine both the physical aspects of museums and also just all the wealth of background information that you can find in books and online learning and everything from history. So,
and so much of it is about interpretation. We had a student who did an internship at the Hermitage, which is Andrew Jackson's home. And I said, oh, what did they say about the Trail of Tears? And she said, oh, you don't talk about the Trail of Tears with Andrew Jackson. And so that was just not a part of their, you know, it was his ancestral home, and it's run by people who are still very tied to the family and the estate. And so that is a particular part of that interpretive experience that, you know, was very eye-opening to her.
Definitely, because, you know, depending on where you are or what you're actually looking at, the historical event, being there in person has definitely a different meaning than just read about it, you know, and kind of just the environment that's there. You know, go to Mount Vernon, and, you know, it's kind of hard to bring up some of George Washington's maybe, you know, questionable decisions because you're at Mount Vernon. So
one of the things that's interesting, so Dr. Downing took a bunch of people in his public history class, and let's see, I think maybe it was museum studies and then maybe early America class, and they went on a field trip where they went to Mount Vernon. But I also know that they talked about Monticello. I'm not sure if they went to Monticello or not, but some of those museums are actually trying to incorporate the difficult history. In Monticello, I think they've restored the slave quarters to try to, you know, try to portray that, because that was a real part of Monticello that doesn't need to be, you know, papered over. And so there is more of a willingness to engage, and there's some really cool things that these historic museums are doing now in terms of interactive games and things that people play when they're there. There's just so much cool stuff there. So that was very good. It was funny to me you mentioned Mount Vernon, because that's one that we have specifically sent students there to kind of see how are they managing this, you know, tricky presentation of an American hero.
Right, you need that, and yeah, definitely an important job as a historian. So, and we actually, kind of leading off that, we have a question from someone in the chat who asked, what would you say is the hardest part about being a historian?
Well, one of the things that's really difficult is finding what you think is the real answer about what happened in the past, because so many times you have conflicting accounts and you have to decide which one is more credible, where do I have corroboration, and sometimes it's on the side you didn't want it to be on, and you have to acknowledge that the evidence is pointing in a different way from what you had maybe gone in thinking about. And I think so it's a kind of combination of, finding that things aren't very clear and really having to struggle to decide, well, what does that mean? And sometimes we don't have enough good evidence,
Right.
Who fired the first shot at Lexington and Concord? We don't really have good evidence
Nope.
of that. I got a lot of side eye in the museum at Lexington and Concord when I said that
Right.
to my kids as I was taking them to the museum. But we don't really know, and sometimes that's really hard to admit. But we had a capstone student, just as an example, we had a capstone student who was looking at women in Marietta in the 1920s, and she wanted to find like the new woman. She wanted divorce, divorcees, and what was happening with women, like the flappers and all of that. And she just found that's not what was happening in Marietta. There were not more divorces in Marietta.
No.
The new woman did not come to our area, was sort of her conclusion. And I know it was really tough.
And unfortunately, that is sometimes the conclusions you have to draw as a historian. Sometimes you put a lot of effort into a certain group of research in an area, and you find that's just not where that was taking place at the time. Even though it may be the big news of the time, it wasn't in that specific area. So that is definitely difficult.
I say also there are moments of history and kinds of history that I find so troubling that they're hard to read about and think about and talk about. We're not far out from Holocaust Remembrance Day, and I always have a hard time, talking about the Holocaust, because it's just a lot to take in. I feel that way about the Atlantic slave trade too, that there are these moments where you struggle to find something positive because it's a long time of really bad things happening. And so I find that's one of the harder parts of the historical profession too. You can't just do the fun
Right.
stuff.
Right. And, because there's a lot of great things that have happened throughout history, and there's a lot of great moments in history and stories to be told, but there's also the flip end of it, which is, a lot of bad things were happening for those good moments to take place. So, and it's also hard, I would say, as a historian, it was hard for me to be in class and realize that when those bad moments, say, are going on, to realize sometimes that the people who were doing it didn't necessarily realize at the time how bad it was. And that gets back to that armchair historian, because from my perspective, I want to be in class and be like, well, they're terrible people. Like that's just it, in the story, just bad people. But, you have to, as a historian, explore all the different elements going on at that time and say, look, this is why they did it, or this is what was going on. And that's definitely hard. I think it's hard to separate that emotional side from the hard facts, I guess, sometimes.
Yeah, there's this, I think it's very easy to be judgmental from the future we're in, and to try to contextualize yourself and to understand, the choices that people were making were in their context. And
right.
That doesn't mean that they get a pass on things, because abolition was around for a long time. A lot of people could have been abolitionists and were not. Like, I don't know, I do hold Thomas Jefferson responsible for his ideas. Well, he could have known better. But I think there are definitely moments where you say these were people who were operating under the circumstances where they grew up and they developed their worldview, and we have blind spots too. We just don't know where they are. and I don't want to be judged too harshly by future generations. And so, we have to, think of the human beings. Human beings are flawed.
Yep, definitely. And you won't know what the flaws in your own time are until someone else is reading about it or looking back. So, that definitely makes it hard. So
that's why I always sort of feel like you get that when you're the grandma, like suddenly, the stuff I thought I was progressive, and now I realize, oh no, my kids are right beyond me.
Dang it, I really thought cigarettes were good for me. Yeah, so it's those kick yourself moments later on. So, but so we have a question that popped up from I think what we were talking about earlier, the different public sectors and stuff like that we were getting on. This person asked, can you explain some of the jobs that graduates from Marietta have gone into in history once, graduating from the department and the college?
Sure. We have a lot of people who go into work at museums, and sometimes those are art museums as well. As I mentioned, we have the graduate who works as the historian for the National Park Service. We've had people who've become landscape architects, which actually there's a really important historical background that's useful for doing that. Let's see. We've had people work for historic villages or what have you, recreation.
Right.
And I think that's really fun. And actually the museum education director at the castle here in Marietta is Kyle Yoho, who was one of our graduates. And now he's a museum educator who does all kinds of fun stuff from the castle, food history and all kinds of great things, history camps for kids in the summer. And there's a lot in that area. And I think, the archival work, we have lots of people who go into library science who end up working in archives. And that's definitely very closely tied to the historical profession as well. But we have people who go into business as well.
Yes.
And businesses need people who can write and research and who understand the importance of context and all those things too. So I just want to, there are all kinds of different applications for history. Of course, we have people who go into teaching. We have lots of teachers in the area and beyond, and that's at all the different levels. We have my son's middle school social studies teacher is a Marietta College history major. And then we have people teaching at the high school level, and we have people who've gotten PhDs and teach at the college level. So we have lots of people who carry in that history education forward.
And I think that's great to point out is the fact that, you come here, you get a history major. Of course, we have people who graduate and go do things in history, work in museums, work, for those archiving and everything like you talked about, or become teachers at various different levels. And all are great history jobs that you can definitely get by coming here to Marietta. But you don't just have to do that. Like you said, you can pair it with something else, and the skills you learn as a historian will help you no matter what you do. So,
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think in this job market, the most important thing is to be adaptable and to be able to sell your skills in a lot of different, job areas. And, that's history is going to give you that. And you keep a lifelong love of history, and that, that knowledge, those skills stay with you for sure.
Yep. And you will also be set if you ever get called on to Jeopardy. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
Jeopardy's my show. I always say World Civ. If you take World Civ, you will do well on Jeopardy.
You will definitely win if you get on there. So,
As long as you don't bring up like that football category.
Right, yes.
If you saw that where none of the people got any of the football clues.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we had another question that came up that said, how are your classes and labs running differently right now during the COVID-19 situation?
Right. Well, I think we in our department, history, philosophy, religion, we value the interchange that we have with our students. And so we have been doing a fair amount of Zooming, kind of like this, but with the whole, the Brady Bunch thing where everybody's screens are up. And, we are, we like the connection. We like the personal face-to-face. And so, for example, in I'm doing World Civilization 2, and we're at the end. So we're doing the post-Cold War world. And I always figure students know more about that than I do. Like I started teaching at Marietta College, Jonah, in 2001.
Just a couple years ago.
And so I've been here almost 20 years. And now I have to teach that whole 20-year period. At the end of World Civ 2 that I didn't have to do. Is 20 more years of history, Jonah, that I get, that I have to do. So in this last bit, I really want the students to say, what is the world you grow up in? Like, what are the trends that you're aware of? And what's your generation's understanding of it? I was a Cold War kid, and I could tell you all about the Cold War atmosphere. And so I really want them to share. And so we've been, Zooming, and I have some little clips. I like to, I was telling you, I like to bring in my little clips. I've got some fusion culture, like global culture with K-pop and Bob Marley, got to have a little reggae, things like that to kind of generate some conversation. But so I just want, I want them to generate it and hear from them. And then I can kind of add in the things that are, a little more meaty, to give them a little bit of background when they say things like, well, terrorism is a problem. And we talk about what is terrorism, who engages in terrorism, what is the war on terror, how has the United States reacted to that in the post-Cold War world. And so that's how I've been, trying to do that. I think that we worked really hard to make sure that we kept up that personal connection with students, because that's what makes the Marietta College learning experience unique. And although it's not ideal to do it online, I think we've done a pretty good job of, keeping it lively and, keeping those lines of communication open to the best that we can.
Right, which I think really speaks to, just how, I would say, how close the professor-student relationship is at Marietta, in the sense that, we were able to move over to online learning pretty quickly and streamlessly. And I don't think that comes easily, especially when you look at a lot of other schools at the moment, unless you do have that connection with students and faculty where they feel comfortable just talking and everything like that. I mean, I know I and other students always, would stop by and ask you questions or something like that, or talk to you about an event that was interesting in class and stuff like that. And I think that really is a great part of the Marietta College experience.
Yeah. You know what I miss, Jonah? Can I tell you what I miss, though, since we're all online?
Of course.
So next to my office is the lounge, right? And there's a group of students who gather there in between classes, or, they've got like an hour from one class to the next. And they're reading for class or they're studying, but they're also talking about the things that they're learning and, current political situations. And I just miss like eavesdropping on that and hearing what students are talking about and the energy that comes from that, and just, being able to, pop in my head and say, what are you what's going on? Why do you think this is going on? And being able to engage just on the fly like that in a very, casual setting where we can actually just talk as people.
Right. And not just in the classroom learning something, just actually conversational learning and stuff like that, and engaging in debate. And I think it's interesting you say that, because anyone watching, we've been doing several of these webinar series, and we're going to continue to do them. But earlier this week, I was doing one with Dr. Schaefer, who's the head of the political science department. Yeah. And he said the exact same thing. I'm not kidding. He said one of the things he missed most was stopping in that lounge, because the political science department and history are on the same floor for everyone, and just talking with students. He said just joking with them, talking with them about current events or what was happening, like, at school or their lives and stuff like that. and just sitting down in a relaxed atmosphere and talking in the lounge. So
Yeah.
it's funny you said that, because
Yeah.
again, you're definitely not the only one who misses that just
Yeah. Oh yeah,
conversational.
he's always in there. I sometimes have to go in and give him a hard time.
As you should, as you should.
That's right. I'll be
Well,
glad to be back there
yes.
again, you
So
know.
hopefully soon.
Yes.
So, all right. Let's see. Any other questions? For anyone who has some, go ahead and ask while we're still here. Okay, we have one that just popped in. This one says, and I feel like we kind of just went over this, but they said, what do you enjoy most about teaching and working at MC? I feel like this gets to what we were just
Yeah,
talking
so yeah, I mean this is similar, but I'm going to tell you this is what I think is most rewarding
about. Okay.
about teaching at Marietta College. Because we are a, small school, I'll have somebody in their freshman year and I get to see their growth, and then I have them in their senior year, and I can tell the transformation that has happened over that 4-year period, where the person comes in as a freshman and, there's a kind of excitement, and maybe you can already see, oh, this person's kind of edgy, right? And I'm just thinking about a couple of students that I remember as freshmen, and then you get to see them develop over the course of their career. And it's not like, you're one person in a 250 student classroom. You don't really, in that situation with the professor doesn't really get to know the individual students, and certainly wouldn't recognize them again in
Right.
another class, or maybe even have them again in another class when you got really big departments. But I'm going to see students in multiple classes over their career, not even just history majors, but really I'll see a lot of people who just, they'll have me for this class, and then they liked it, so they'll take class later on in their career. And I just love seeing that transformation that happens at Marietta College. There's something magical about, what happens, as you said, in the classroom, but also in the hallways, and, with the experiential learning and all those kinds of things, that people leave transformed, and I think totally ready to go.
Yes.
World. And it's
And
just exciting to be part of that.
yes, definitely. And I would say you get to see students not just, in those 4 years, but so many students come back for our homecoming and want to stop in and talk with professors or sit in on a class they loved, and
Yeah.
so
I love it. It's a little like the end of Animal House, where you get to find out what everybody does. It's like, oh, come back and tell me what you're doing. I can't believe it. That's amazing. I just love all that.
yes,
People you wouldn't expect, things you wouldn't expect, because people's
exactly.
lives just take all kinds of interesting turns.
And yes, it really does. I mean, I can say for even myself, I have, I was double major, one in political science, one in history, and Dr. Schaefer and Dr. Morgan, who are both in the political science department, both have said, you changed so much from freshman year. So, it's just one of those things where it's cool that professors are able to get to know you as a person and see that development. It's not just, here's a paper, write it. Yes, there's assignments and there's work. Obviously, it's a college, and that's part of it. But it's
and that's
also
how you transform, right?
Right.
It's the hard work, it's the struggle,
Yes.
the work in the cocoon.
Right. And that's why I always joke. I loved history, and again, I got started with it, a major at the end of my freshman year, so really got into history classes my sophomore year. And I remember walking into one of my first, classes I had was with you and Dr. Young and stuff like that. And I walked in there and thought, man, this is going to be easy. I know history. And I left there that day and was like, I do not know history. I was like, I do not know
Humility
history.
is a good thing. It's
I was like,
not on
the level that I thought. So, it's good. The college is challenging in the sense that you get to learn a lot of information and practical information that you can use, like we talked about in the real world. But again, you also get a ton of new relationships that last your whole life. be it fellow students and professors that you get to come back and see that transformation.
Right. And, this is the practical element of that. I mean, I'm just saying that's what's rewarding for me personally, is seeing the transformative effect there. But then when it's time to write letters of recommendation, you got people who actually know you and can speak to what you're like. And that's why we have really good rate of acceptance to graduate programs of a variety of kinds.
Yep. And which is a very important thing. So, and it's important that you have those relationships and get to know people. So, all right.
Hey, Jonah, were you part of the group that got to meet David McCullough?
Yes. Yeah. I was actually just talking about that because I just finished reading his book Pioneers that he wrote while he was in Marietta, and when he was there, I had him sign 1776 because that's one of my all-time favorite books. That's like my nerd out moment, and so so I got him to sign that. So yes, I definitely was able to meet him. Was super excited for it.
Yeah, that was totally cool. And I think it just shows you what a rich area for history we are. And when I was interviewing here, 20 years ago, I remember they showed me the special collections archive, and it was like, we have to get students in here because there's so much amazing history, and why is nobody studying all this? And there's still tons that David McCullough, did not necessarily use or find particularly relevant to his story that he was telling. And I just think it's really exciting to have that history right here. And he was so wonderful, such a gracious person, and very happy to meet our history students, and that was great.
Yes, and he really was. He was willing to meet everyone and talk with them, and it was cool that this, this nationally recognized famous author and historian was at our college doing research and was taking the time to meet with students. So that's definitely something special that you may not get at bigger universities where there's a ton going on or there's a ton of students and stuff like that. You might be pushed a little into the background, but here we truly do care about students. So
and in a small place you just have all the more opportunities. There's where the college is here for this relatively compact group of students, and so you get the opportunities. And I went to a small liberal arts college myself. I didn't want to get lost in the shuffle. I didn't want to be one of thousands and thousands, and I think it's just very valuable. It's a unique thing in the world to be able to have that kind of access in higher education, and I think we really excel at it in general as a college, no matter what the major.
I would completely agree. So, well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. So, Katie, do you have anything else you want to add or end on?
Well, Jonah, I mean, you were history major. Like, what do you think was the best thing about your experience with the history department, if I may put you on the spot?
Of course. That's, that's why I'm here. So I would say, one, there's so many things. I don't even know where to begin, but I guess two of the major events that I enjoyed and loved about the history department at Marietta was honestly, one, the professors. You guys really are great. And I'm not just saying that because you're here, but it really was fun to come in and talk with you guys. I would stop in your office or Matt's office all the time to just talk about something we did in class or just something I read or something, interesting. It was fun to get, just the perspective from you guys because, it's not, history doesn't have to be just, dusty old tomes reading, about things forever ago. It can be fun and you guys make it fun. So I would say that is something, was just the relationships at the college and just being able to talk with, about history and things in the present day about history and just how it all interacts. So that was something really great. Two, the courses themselves, there's a lot of interesting courses that are offered. It's not just that's something I always tell people, in admissions when people come and they say, I'm interested in history, but, I feel like I've kind of burned out history wise. And I always am like, okay, history is not just the American Revolution and the Civil War. There's
Yeah.
more that happened. Trust me. Okay. You can take all these classes. So, I think that's really great. We just have some very unique classes in the history department that are fun to take. So I would say
Yeah.
those are
Dr. Young's doing his history and film class again.
which is awesome.
And
It's
that's
a
really
very
fun.
interesting class to, one, you get to watch some really good films, but two, to see the background of the films, not just the films themselves being made, but the history during the times of the film,
Mm-hmm.
how all that interacts is very interesting. And
yeah, because they're a secondary source for the history they're portraying, but they're a primary source for the time in which they were made themselves.
exactly.
So,
So
yeah.
it's truly a unique perspective on it. And I definitely recommend that. Dr. Young also has for anyone tuning in, Dr. Young has a great World War II class that definitely should check out. It's a must take. Does a great job. And I would say also, if you're a history major, the capstone obviously is
Yeah, you get to do your own research project. You pick what you're interested in, and then you follow that and make your own. You're making history.
Yes.
And I think that's what's so exciting.
And it really is. You can pick a field or a time and delve into it with your historical perspective on whatever you want. I mean, I did the War of the Roses and Game of Thrones, so it really is.
Yeah,
Whatever
that
you
was
want to
fun
choose.
paper.
Yes, it was a fun paper. So, who doesn't like to watch some Game of Thrones episodes for background information? So,
but you can critique it, right? So
you
were
can
able to kind of create a little criticism at the
Yep.
same time.
So it's very cool getting to choose that and kind of what you look into. So that's definitely a plus. So yeah, I would say just those are some of my favorite things. But the history experience overall at Marietta truly was amazing. So
Yeah. And I was thinking, like, when you were talking about stopping into somebody's office, like the history faculty, we like each other and we're interested in our topic, and so we'll often end up talking with each other, and students will come by and we get the students engaged in it, and we feel like we're champions for our students, and it's like you said, a lot of it is the relationships that you build over the time that you're here, and that's really meaningful.
And that is something I think that's really cool about having the political science and the history department in Thomas and stuff like that, is all the faculty in there get along with each other. And it's great because you'll start out talking to someone, and next thing you know, it might be you and Dr. Young and Dr. Schaefer, and we're all talking about some topic, and it's just great to get the different perspectives and sides and just general discussion about an event. So
yeah,
it's very interesting. And it's what makes Marietta is that the relationship with professors, but also the ability to do your own thing, and not to be cheesy and use our own advertising, but blaze a new trail, right?
yeah, no, that's what I think too. Don't be a cog in the machine.
Right.
You want to design the machine, design a new and better machine.
Right. We're not,
or critique the machine. Don't just be a cog.
We don't just put that out there for advertising purposes. It really is true. The professors, the school, they want you to investigate your own area of study and look into it. If it goes against the norm or the machine, even better. Just go out and do it. Do something new. So, I think that's another great aspect of Marietta. So, yeah. So,
well, good. Well, thanks, Jonah. It's been nice chatting with you.
Yes, definitely. Looking forward to when we're all back on campus, and we can stop in and talk. So that'll be great. Again, we're doing these webinar series throughout the week, so and we'll do them again. So if you missed any, be sure to look at those online, and be sure to tune into any others. If on my side of things, just wrapping up here, if you want to talk with me, anything about admission wise, you can email admit@marietta.edu. I'd be happy to do a Zoom interview like this with anybody who has questions. So yeah, but thank you, Katie, for stopping by and doing this.
Well, thanks, Jonah. You're a good, I think, a good role model for what Marietta College students can become and be. And so.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, truly. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to blush now.
The Mutual Appreciation Society. That's okay. That's good.
Yes. So, but yes, thank you. Thank you for allowing us to do this. And,
Sure.
and, you know, if anyone has more questions about history tuning in, I'm sure Katie would love to hear from you. So be
Absolutely.
sure. So, all right. Well,
All
thank
right.
you, Katie.
Great. Thanks.
Nice. Bye.
Bye-bye.